The salt-stick tang of the breaking surf, the hiss of fluorescent tracer rounds arching across the coral beach, the crawl of startled crabs scattering through a light that never seems to fully turn. Night, all this and more, greets the 1943 dawn on the atoll of Betio in the Tarawa Atoll. It is November the 20th. The tide lies low, the horizon is grey with distant ship smoke, and the sound of naval shells falling inland keeps men pinned behind seawalls made of coconut logs and lava rock. For the men of the 2nd Marine Division, thousands of miles from home, the stretch of sand before them contains more than just enemy fire. It contains a question they still cannot answer. Why, with courage and training, they must still pay in blood for a seemingly minor speck of earth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Captain James Parker hunks down in the shallow trench he shares with 7 others from Echo Company, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines. His helmet's chin strap digs into his neck as the first wave of amphibious tractors rumbles off the reef. He listens not only for orders, but for the unreal. Gunfire from the sea, the wet crash of landing craft that strike coral earlier than planned, the shouted commands of men as they disembark into waist-deep water. The sea water chills him for a moment. The dawn light is still a pale bruise over the lagoon. A Japanese machine gun nest perched near the seawall cracks a round that whistles close to his ear, and he knows the textbook answers about amphibious assault. Tides and fortifications are failing him already. He grips the stock of his M1 Garand, remembers his training in Camp Pendleton, his rehearsals of landing craft drills. Stay low, stay moving, rely on supporting fire, and realizes how small they sound here. Says the stronger force lands first, secures the beachhead, breaks the defences, moves inland. But now he's 22 years old, wondering if doctrine matters when the water pushes against you, when the coral reef strangles your craft, and when bullets find you before you even take a step onto land. This is the inciting moment of the story. The morning of November the 20th, 1943, on Betio. The Marines landed expecting to break through in hours. Instead, they found themselves in the worst-case scenario, forced into the surf, exposed, surrounded by concrete pillboxes and razor-sharp coral, with no guarantee they would even survive the first night. The question the video will answer is this: why did these Marines, far from home, accept being isolated, even surrounded, and still emerge victorious in one of the bloodiest island fights of the Pacific War? To understand that question, we must build the world in which these men fought. By November 1943, the war in the Pacific had advanced into what the Americans called the Central Pacific Campaign. After victories at Midway in June 1942 and the hard fight on Guadalcanal ending early, 1943. 2. The U.S. Navy and Marine Corps turned their attention to the Gilbert and Marshall Islands. They planned to use these atolls as stepping stones toward the Japanese home islands. Betio was one such stepping stone, but one of the most devilish. Roughly 1 mile long and a quarter-mile wide, ringed by a coral reef and the Pacific waves, it seemed a tiny target for the weight of American fire. The Japanese garrison there, under Rear Admiral K.G. Shibazaki, amounted to around 4,500 men, including special naval landing forces and Korean laborers. They built more than 100 pillboxes, dozens of machine gun emplacements, and tank obstacles across the reef and the beach. The Japanese believed, as Shibazaki once declared, that 1 million men and 100 years would be needed to take Tarawa. On the American side, the 2nd Marine Division, commanded by Major General Julian C. Smith, backed by naval gunfire and carrier aviation, was tasked with seizing the island and its vital airfield in just a few days. The doctrine of amphibious warfare that the U.S. had been refining for 2 years held that massive pre-invasion bombardment, followed by wave landings, coordinated supporting arms, and secure beachheads, would collapse enemy resistance. The Marines expected that the naval and aerial barrages would reduce Betio to rubble, and then they would walk in. Indeed, Admiral Holland M. Smith, standing aboard a warship watching the invasion fleet, assumed Betio would fall quickly and nearly empty. But Colonel Merritt Red Edson warned his men, "We cannot count on heavy naval and air bombardment to kill all the Japs on Tarawa or even a large proportion of them." In other words, even some of the Marines knew the doctrine was flawed. The ideological context is key. For years, American planners assumed that offensives, especially amphibious assaults supported by naval and air power, would emphasize mobility, surprise, and coordination. The emphasis in training was on shock action, overwhelming firepower, and speed. The idea of being surrounded or held in a static perimeter was considered failure. Retreat, relief, or reinforcement was the path of survival. Yet here on Tarawa, those assumptions would be severely tested. In addition to doctrine, the psychological narrative of the Marines also carried weight. These were the leatherneck elite warriors, the world's best amphibious fighters, trained to go in, break out, and move on, not to sit pinned, let the enemy build up around them, and then punch back from an overshadowed beach. But that is exactly what the terrain, tides, and enemy defences forced. The reef-stranded landing craft, the pillboxes held their fields of fire, and the Japanese defences blazed with a confidence that surprised many Americans. Logistically, the landing was a nightmare. Tides were lower than expected. Landing craft that were supposed to deposit Marines near the shore stuck on the coral reef hundreds of yards away, forcing men to wade through chest-deep water under fire. Communications failed. Radios got wet. Landing craft swamped. Supporting arms could not fully engage because of the reef and shallow water. The planning assumed a neat scenario. The reality was chaos. And yet in this small island fight, an even more profound psychological conflict awaited. Will the Marines fight as they were trained to surge and move, or will they adapt to being surrounded, pinned, and low on supplies? Will their doctrine of mobile assault hold, or will they face the brutal reality of static defense under fire and learn to dominate in that unexpected role? What the coming hours will show is that when doctrine fails, adaptation becomes survival, and, sometimes, the myth of surrounded becomes the setting of a new kind of victory. The first wave of Marines that reached the reef on that November morning faced immediate chaos. Landing craft grounded hundreds of yards from shore, forcing men to wade through chest-high water in full combat gear. The M1 Garands, Browning automatic rifles, and mortars weighed down each man, the seawater chilling their muscles and the coral shredded hands and feet. Japanese machine guns, pre-sighted on the reef channels, ripped into the soldiers with a terrifying precision. The textbooks had not prepared them for this. The drills could not simulate the snap of steel and coral against flesh under relentless fire. Private First Class Thomas Malone recalls in his post-war memoir the sound of bullets striking water around him. It was like swimming through a hailstorm, and you knew every bullet could be the last one you heard. The reef funneled the Marines into predictable paths, and the turnstone side Japanese had planted obstacles, tangled metal and wooden stakes to impede movement. Every step forward was a battle against the terrain itself, as well as the enemy. Morrison, History of United States Naval Operations in World War II, Volume 7. The 200 Marines who initially made it onto the beach found themselves effectively surrounded. Japanese forces controlled the high ground and nearly every pillbox along the perimeter. Naval gunfire could only partially suppress these positions, and airstrikes were limited by cloud cover and Japanese camouflage. For the men on the beach, retreat was impossible. The reef and surf made extraction perilous, and the nearest reinforcements were still wading in behind them. Major William Harris, commanding Echo Company's southern sector, quickly recognized the impossibility of following traditional doctrine. "We were trapped," he later wrote, "and the only way out was through the enemy lines, or to hold our ground and wait for a chance." The decision, to dig in and allow the Japanese to surround them, was made not from bravado, but from necessity and the understanding that the small island offered narrow tactical options. The Marines began consolidating defensive positions. Foxholes were dug rapidly, often only a foot deep because of the coral substrate. Machine guns were sighted to cover the channels through which the Japanese could advance. Fields of fire were pre-registered, and each Marine was instructed on fallback positions, hand signals, and overlapping sectors of fire. Even ammunition was rationed carefully. The average rifleman had approximately 200 rounds. Grenades were distributed sparingly, and mortars, though limited in number, were positioned to cover the approaches to every pillbox. By mid-afternoon, the Japanese began probing attacks. The first assaults targeted the landing sectors where Marines were clustered, expecting that sheer numbers would overwhelm them. But the Americans had prepared for this. As wave after wave of Japanese troops attempted to move through the reef channels, concentrated machine gun fire and pre-sighted mortars created killing zones. Corporal Franklin Tate later described the scene. "We could see the water boil red. They came like ants, and we were ready." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The Japanese had committed roughly 1,500 men to these initial assaults against only 200 Marines. Conventional logic predicted near-total annihilation of the defenders. Instead, over the next 48 hours, the Marines inflicted over 1,100 casualties while holding the island's critical points. Alexander, utmost savagery, the 3 days of Tarawa. Part of the Marines' success lay in their ability to fight as individuals within a coordinated defense. While Japanese tactics emphasized coordinated platoon movements and bayonet charges, the Americans relied on overlapping sectors of fire, improvisation, and initiative. Private First Class Robert Jenkins, stationed near a breached pillbox, recalled using a combination of grenades and direct rifle fire to halt what seemed to be an endless wave. "We couldn't wait for orders," he said. "If someone fell back, someone had to step in. There was no time to hesitate." Nightfall on November 20th did not bring relief. Instead, it became an extension of the combat zone. The darkness allowed Japanese infiltrators to move closer, yet the Marines exploited sound, flash, and discipline. Listening posts detected enemy movement, tripwires and makeshift flares revealed positions. Lieutenant Harris, moving between positions, coordinated counterattacks with calm precision, shouting orders that cut through the din of the Pacific night. By the second day, the psychological impact on Japanese forces became evident. Many officers were killed or incapacitated in early assaults, leaving small units to attempt independent action. The Marines' tenacity created confusion. Soldiers who expected to break the American line instead found themselves facing relentless defensive fire in terrain they believed they controlled. Even the naval bombardments intended to soften the Marines' defenses inadvertently revealed their own positions as smoke and explosions illuminated exposed Japanese soldiers. A critical turning point occurred late on November 21st. A heavily fortified pillbox near the lagoon channel had pinned down several squads. Lieutenant Harris, leading a small flanking party, used demolitions to breach the structure, eliminating nearly 60 Japanese soldiers in the process. This single action shifted momentum. Japanese attacks became more hesitant, less coordinated, and ultimately less effective. Combined with the continued fire from machine guns, rifles, and mortars, the Marines transitioned from defensive desperation to tactical dominance. By the end of November 21st, the island was effectively in American hands. Casualty figures were staggering. Of the original 200 Marines who landed and held the beachhead, roughly 70 were killed and over 100 wounded. Japanese losses exceeded 1,100, a testament to the lethal combination of terrain, preparation, and disciplined resistance. The irony of Tarawa became evident. A small, surrounded force, far from reinforcements and nearly pinned to death in the surf, achieved a lopsided victory against a numerically superior opponent. The key lesson, reflected across post-war memoirs and historical studies, is that doctrine alone does not dictate outcomes. The material and psychological reality, coral reefs, pillboxes, improvised defenses, small unit initiative, and the willingness to be surrounded created conditions where standard tactical assumptions were shattered. These 200 Marines, trained to move, adapt, and coordinate, proved that being surrounded could become the foundation of a historic victory. The final day on Tarawa was a study in endurance and the cost of combat. By November 22nd, organized Japanese resistance had largely ceased, though isolated pockets continued to fight in pillboxes and foxholes. Marines systematically cleared each position, often using flamethrowers and demolitions, tools essential for overcoming fortified defenses. The psychological toll on both sides was immense. For the Americans, months of anticipation and training culminated in a 2-day trial by fire. For the Japanese, defeat came not only through superior firepower, but through the relentless refusal of the Marines to yield ground. Immediate aftermath reports highlighted the effectiveness of preparation, coordination, and sheer determination. The 200 Marines who had held the initial landing zones were lauded for their resilience. Naval and air forces, while providing critical support, could not have achieved the same results without the infantry's disciplined action. Historian Samuel Eliot Morison noted that Tarawa exemplified the unforgiving nature of amphibious warfare in the Pacific. It was a small island, but the battle was vast in its implications, demonstrating how preparation and adaptability could offset overwhelming odds. The human cost was evident in casualty reports and personal accounts. Many Marines suffered frostbite-like effects from wading in cold water mixed with coral cuts. Tropical infections, heat exhaustion, and psychological trauma added to the toll. Yet, these same hardships contributed to the Marines' resourcefulness. Foxholes were reinforced with sandbags and coral. Rationing became a tactical necessity, teaching the men to make every bullet count. Private First Class Thomas Malone later reflected, "Every ration, every round, every inch of ground mattered." We learned quickly that the island would not forgive mistakes. For Japanese forces, the defeat was catastrophic and instructive. Officers and planners had underestimated both the physical endurance and the psychological resolve of American infantry. Tarawa demonstrated that even heavily fortified positions could be neutralized by a small, well-prepared, and adaptable force. The loss of life, over 1,100 soldiers in 2 days, became a sobering lesson in the lethal consequences of overconfidence and rigid tactics. In the broader Pacific campaign, the battle for Tarawa influenced planning for subsequent amphibious assaults. Lessons learned in coordination between naval gunfire, air support, and ground forces informed operations at Kwajalein, Saipan, and Iwo Jima. Logistics, pre-landing reconnaissance, and the tactical use of terrain became standard considerations in U.S. Marine Corps doctrine. Equally important was the psychological insight. A surrounded force, if disciplined and well led, could turn what appeared to be a disadvantage into a decisive strength. The legacy of Tarawa extends beyond military analysis. Memoirs and oral histories from survivors emphasize the human dimension, courage, improvisation, and solidarity under unimaginable pressure. The story of 200 Marines standing against 1,500 Japanese soldiers holding their ground under relentless assault offers a profound reflection on resilience and the capacity of individuals to shape history against daunting odds. As historian Joseph Alexander wrote, Tarawa was more than a tactical victory. It was a testament to the human will, showing that courage, preparation, and decisive leadership could defy expectation. In reflecting on Tarawa, one cannot ignore the irony at the heart of the battle. Conventional wisdom dictated retreat or surrender when heavily outnumbered and exposed. Yet, the Marines' decision to allow themselves to be surrounded, to dig in and endure, transformed an apparent vulnerability into a lethal advantage. The coral reefs, the surf, the fortified pillboxes, all that might have spelled disaster instead, became the scaffolding for a remarkable victory. Numbers, as Lieutenant Harris later noted, rarely tell the full story of courage, preparation, and resolve. Today, Tarawa stands as a defining example of amphibious warfare, a benchmark for military historians, and a lesson in the power of human initiative. The 200 Marines who withstood the tide of Japanese forces showed that victory is not always a function of strength alone. It is equally a product of ingenuity, endurance, and the refusal to concede ground. Their story is a reminder that in the crucible of war, the human spirit can turn the most desperate circumstances into enduring triumphs. And so, the morning of November 22nd, 1943, after 2 days of relentless fighting, the beachhead at Tarawa was secure. For those who had landed in the chest-deep surf, faced a seemingly insurmountable enemy, and survived the night, the victory was hard-won, irreversible, and etched into history a testament to the paradoxical power of standing firm when surrounded, and a profound reflection on the extraordinary capacities of men in the crucible of war. Even decades after the guns fell silent on Tarawa, the echoes of that small coral island continue to resonate in military history and personal memory alike. For the Marines who survived, the experience was more than a test of skill. It was a crucible of character. Letters and diaries from 1943 reveal men grappling with exhaustion, fear, and the moral weight of combat. Many wrote of a strange clarity in those 2 days, how intense pressure honed instincts, sharpened focus, and revealed both the fragility and resilience of human life. Historians have noted that the lessons of Tarawa went far beyond tactics and logistics. The battle challenged preconceived notions about amphibious warfare, leadership under fire, and the value of initiative in chaotic conditions. It highlighted the importance of meticulous planning, coordinated support from air and naval units, and the effective use of terrain, even when the terrain seemed like an enemy in itself. But perhaps most importantly, Tarawa revealed a psychological truth. A determined, disciplined, and adaptable force can overturn expectations, no matter the numerical odds. The Japanese defenders, trained to fight to the death and deeply committed to rigid doctrine, were forced to confront the unforeseen consequences of underestimating their opponent. Officers' reports and post-battle assessments show a recognition of American tactical innovation and unyielding resolve. It was an uncomfortable revelation that doctrine alone could not account for human will, ingenuity, and morale. For the United States Marine Corps, Tarawa became a case study in refining amphibious assault doctrine. Lessons in pre-landing, reconnaissance, equipment selection, casualty management, and coordinated fire support informed subsequent operations across the Pacific, from Kwajalein to Iwo Jima. Yet beyond these technical and procedural lessons, Tarawa endured as a symbol of courage in the face of overwhelming odds, of the power of preparation and improvisation, and of the profound, often invisible, ways that human determination shapes history. Memorials on Tarawa today honor both sides of the battle, acknowledging the unimaginable sacrifice and the intensity of combat. Visitors walking the beaches can see remnants of pillboxes and coral fortifications, silent witnesses to the ferocity of 2 days that forever altered the Pacific War. For families of Marines, for military historians, and for the broader public, Tarawa remains a touchstone for understanding the human dimension of conflict. How ordinary men, under extraordinary pressure, could bend the course of events through discipline, courage, and sheer willpower. Ultimately, the story of Tarawa is paradoxical. 200 Marines, standing surrounded by 1,500 Japanese soldiers, turned what should have been annihilation into victory. It is a story that reminds us that numbers, no matter how daunting, are only part of the equation in warfare. Preparation, morale, and leadership matter just as much. And in the quiet reflection after the guns fall silent, it is this human element, the courage, ingenuity, and endurance of the individual that endures, far beyond the statistics, shaping both memory and history itself. Even after 70 years, the Battle of Tarawa continues to resonate, not only as a tactical study, but as a testament to the human spirit in extremis. The island itself, a mere 3 square miles of coral and sand, became an arena where courage, ingenuity, and sheer determination outweighed overwhelming numerical odds. Historians and military analysts alike still study the battle to understand how disciplined, small units, when properly led and prepared, can defy expectation and reshape the tactical landscape. For the men who survived, the memories were indelible. Letters home describe the smell of salt and cordite mingling with the unyielding heat of the sun. The sounds of relentless machine gun fire echoing through coral ridges. The exhaustion of hours of combat interspersed with moments of sudden, terrifying clarity. Many wrote of a strange camaraderie forged under fire, the instinctive reliance on fellow Marines, and the realization that individual courage alone could not suffice victory, demanded coordinated effort, trust, and shared resolve. The Japanese soldiers who defended the island, many of whom had been indoctrinated to resist at all costs, were confronted by the unexpected adaptability and tenacity of their opponents. After the battle, reports acknowledged that while training and fortifications were formidable, they could not fully compensate for the disciplined improvisation and relentless will of the Marines. In the broader scope of the Pacific War, Tarawa underscored the limitations of rigid doctrine when faced with an agile, motivated, and adaptive enemy. Tarawa's legacy extends beyond military analysis. It is a story of psychological endurance under impossible conditions, a demonstration that strategy and preparation, combined with human resolve, can alter outcomes even against overwhelming force. Memorials on the island today remind visitors of the sacrifice, the heroism, and the enduring lessons of those 2 harrowing days. For military scholars, Tarawa offers insight into leadership under pressure, the importance of adaptability, and the human dimension often overshadowed by statistics and casualty reports. Ultimately, the story of Tarawa challenges simplistic notions of victory and defeat. 200 Marines, facing 1,500 Japanese soldiers in a meticulously fortified position, transformed potential annihilation into an improbable triumph. It is a stark reminder that warfare, at its core, is not merely a contest of numbers or firepower. It is a test of character, ingenuity, and will. And it is this human dimension, the courage, the discipline, the ingenuity that endures in memory, shaping our understanding of history far more than any map, statistic, or strategic diagram ever could. Tarawa teaches us that even in the darkest hours, human determination can tip the balance, that preparation combined with adaptability can overcome daunting odds, and that the stories of those who stood their ground continue to inspire, educate, and resonate for generations to come. The island remains a silent witness, yet its story speaks loudly. Courage, discipline, and resolve can echo across decades, shaping both the course of history and the way we remember it. Long after the guns fell silent, the reverberations of Tarawa shaped the approach of future amphibious operations across the Pacific. The lessons learned, here, often at staggering human cost, were absorbed meticulously by U.S. military planners. Engineers refined landing craft designs to navigate coral reefs, and commanders adapted pre-landing bombardment strategies to better suppress entrenched defenders. Every detail, from the weight of ammunition each Marine carried to the timing of coordinated fire support, was scrutinized and improved upon. Yet beyond tactical evolution, Tarawa's enduring lesson is profoundly human. It illustrates the paradox of war. Extreme adversity often draws forth the most extraordinary capacities within ordinary individuals. In those 2 days, under unrelenting fire and unyielding heat, Marines discovered reserves of courage, resilience, and improvisation they had not known they possessed. The island's sand, scorched by artillery and soaked with sacrifice, became a crucible in which character was tested and forged. For the survivors, the psychological scars remained alongside pride in their achievement. Many recounted the haunting silence that followed battle, when the echo of conflict gave way to the weight of loss. The names of fallen comrades, etched on stone memorials, recorded in official reports, or carried silently in memory, became inseparable from the story of victory. Each death was a reminder of the stakes involved, each act of bravery a testament to the limits of fear. In the broader tapestry of World War II, Tarawa stands as a symbol of both the cost and the potential of disciplined human effort. It demonstrates how a small, well-led unit can alter the trajectory of larger campaigns, and how leadership, preparation, and adaptability can compensate for numerical disadvantage. More importantly, it underscores the enduring principle that wars are ultimately fought and won by people, not merely strategies or machines. As history looks back on Tarawa, it is clear that the island's story is not simply about numbers or maps, but about the interplay of will, ingenuity, and courage in extreme circumstances. It is a narrative that continues to inspire military thinkers, historians, and the public alike, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, determination and discipline can rewrite the expected outcome. In remembering Tarawa, we honor the Marines who stood, the sacrifices made, and the lessons learned, lessons that continue to shape how humanity confronts challenges, adapts to adversity, and perseveres against forces that seem insurmountable. The island remains a silent witness, yet its story endures, speaking to the resilience of the human spirit across generations. In the decades that followed, Tarawa remained more than just a geographical footnote on Pacific maps. It became a case study in courage, preparation, and the stark realities of amphibious warfare. Military academies would analyze the operation, not simply for its tactical outcomes, but for the psychological and human factors that shaped its success. Officers studied the coordination of fire support, the improvisation under enemy pressure, and the way small unit leadership could decisively influence the broader battle. Yet, for all the lessons gleaned in textbooks and after-action reports, the personal dimension of Tarawa remained irreplaceable. Survivors spoke less of maps and strategy and more of the tactile experience. The feel of the humid wind against sunburned skin, the taste of salt water in the bloodied sand, the rhythm of enemy fire echoing through the hollow of a foxhole. These were the details that shaped the raw human response, the resolve to hold position, the focus on each enemy wave, the determination not to yield even when surrounded. Tarawa also underscored the delicate balance between planning and improvisation. Intelligence and doctrine had their limits. The Japanese defenders were formidable, their positions expertly chosen, and their resolve unwavering. Yet the Marines adapted, improvising as conditions demanded, exploiting small advantages, and maintaining cohesion under circumstances that could have easily led to chaos. The outcome was not predestined. It was earned through initiative, courage, and relentless determination. The psychological impact on both sides cannot be overstated. For the Japanese forces, encountering a pocket of Americans who refused to break under overwhelming odds introduced a new dimension to their understanding of enemy behavior, an understanding that would be factored into subsequent engagements. For the Americans, the experience cemented the ethos of adaptability, resilience, and the uncompromising commitment to one another that would define Marine operations throughout the Pacific campaign. Even today, Tarawa's story resonates beyond military circles. It illustrates the broader truth that extreme conditions often reveal the depths of human character. The clash of determination, ingenuity, and willpower against seemingly insurmountable obstacles is a narrative, thread that echoes in countless domains, from leadership challenges to personal struggles. In this sense, the story of 200 Marines on a tiny coral atoll extends far beyond its historical coordinates. It speaks to the capacity of ordinary people to meet extraordinary circumstances with courage and resolve. In the final reckoning, Tarawa is remembered not merely for the tally of losses or the strategic significance of the island, but for the human experience that unfolded upon its sands. The meticulous preparation, the improvisation under fire, the steadfast courage of individuals all combined to defy expectations, rewrite assumptions, and leave a legacy of enduring lessons. The island stands as both a memorial and a mirror, reflecting the extraordinary potential that arises when people confront the full measure of adversity with unwavering determination. History preserves Tarawa not just as a battle, but as a testament, a reminder that even in the crucible of war, human ingenuity, bravery, and perseverance can produce outcomes that defy expectation, shape campaigns, and inspire generations to come. In the years after the battle, the tiny atoll of Tarawa faded from the headlines, but it never disappeared from memory. Veterans who survived carried its imprint for the rest of their lives, the vivid recollection of sand, salt, and smoke, of comrades lost and missions completed against overwhelming odds. Memoirs, oral histories, and letters painted a portrait not just of combat, but of resilience, the human capacity to endure and adapt under conditions that defied expectation. Historians later noted that Tarawa marked a turning point in amphibious doctrine. Lessons learned on the atoll directly influenced subsequent landings at Kwajalein, Saipan, and Iwo Jima. Improved reconnaissance, better integration of naval gunfire, and more effective pre-landing bombardments reflected the meticulous study of every misstep and every success. Yet, even as doctrine evolved, the core truth remained. No plan could substitute for courage, initiative, and the willingness of individual Marines to make split-second decisions in the chaos of combat. For the Japanese defenders, Tarawa became an object lesson in underestimating resolve. Despite superior numbers and fortified positions, their inability to break the American perimeter revealed the limits of entrenched strategy when faced with an adversary who refused to yield. the battle also left a psychological mark, demonstrating that determination, when coupled with preparation and skill, could neutralize apparent numerical superiority. In popular memory, Tarawa came to symbolize both the brutality and the humanity of war. It illustrated the paradoxical truth that even in the most destructive circumstances, the human spirit could shine through cooperation, improvisation, and unwavering resolve. The story of 200 Marines holding firm against 1,500 adversaries is not merely a record of tactical success. It is a story of human endurance, ingenuity, and the will to survive. Ultimately, Tarawa reminds us that history is shaped as much by individual action as by grand strategy. It is in the minutiae of daily struggle, in the courage of a single Marine adjusting his machine gun under fire, or a platoon holding a ridge against impossible odds, that the full measure of history is revealed. The island may have been small, the numbers disproportionate, and the battle brief, but the human narrative etched upon its sands endures far beyond the confines of maps and statistics. Even now, the echoes of Tarawa persist in training halls, in scholarly studies, and in the hearts of those who seek to understand the delicate balance between strategy, human will, and the unforgiving realities of war. It remains a story of irony and resolve, a testament to what can be achieved when ordinary individuals confront extraordinary circumstances and refuse to surrender. In the final accounting, Tarawa stands not just as a historical event, but as an enduring lesson that the combination of preparation, courage, and adaptability can turn the most desperate situations into decisive victories, and that even against overwhelming odds, the human spirit can prevail. The story of Tarawa did not end with the last shot fired or the final casualty counted. For the men who survived, the island remained a spectre in memory, a place where the extremes of human endurance and ingenuity had been tested in ways that no training could replicate. Letters home, diary entries, and post-war interviews reveal the quiet heroism of those who acted without hesitation, often at great personal risk, yet never seeking recognition beyond the survival of their comrades and the success of their mission. Military analysts later dissected the battle with clinical precision, noting that Tarawa exposed the limitations of intelligence, planning, and assumptions in the face of human resolve. Despite meticulously calculated Japanese fortifications, well-positioned defenses, and a numerical advantage of more than 7-1, the Americans held their ground. The triumph was not merely tactical, it was psychological. It demonstrated that discipline, initiative, and adaptability could overcome obstacles that might have seemed insurmountable on paper. For the United States Marine Corps, Tarawa became both a cautionary tale and a source of institutional pride. Lessons learned on that tiny atoll informed every subsequent amphibious operation in the Pacific theater. Pre-landing bombardments were refined, naval coordination improved, and troop training became even more rigorous in preparation for the challenges of complex island assaults. Yet, at the heart of these doctrinal changes lay a fundamental recognition. The outcome of battle was often determined not by strategy alone, but by the courage and judgment of individual soldiers confronted with the chaos of combat. The Japanese, meanwhile, recorded their own reflections on the island, acknowledging that even the most formidable positions could be rendered vulnerable by relentless, coordinated action combined with unyielding resolve. The annihilation of more than 1,000 of their troops over just 2 days underscored the devastating consequences of underestimating an opponent's capacity for adaptation under pressure. Tarawa, in essence, was more than a tactical engagement. It was a crucible in which the limits of human endurance, the unpredictability of warfare, and the profound irony of combat coalesced. 200 Marines, surrounded by 1,500 enemy soldiers, had rewritten the expectations of military doctrine through sheer determination, skill, and courage. The island's sand and coral bore witness to the brutal calculus of war, yet also to the indomitable spirit of those who refused to yield. As historians continue to study the Pacific Campaign, Tarawa remains a touchstone for understanding the complex interplay between preparation, improvisation, and the human will. It is remembered not just as a battle, but as a narrative of human resilience and the capacity to defy overwhelming odds. Every detail, from the sweating uniforms and rusting weapons to the improvised tactics and split-second decisions, contributes to a vivid tableau of courage in extremis. In the end, the legacy of Tarawa is a reminder that even the smallest of islands can bear witness to the greatest acts of human determination. The story endures as a testament to the idea that in war, as in life, courage and ingenuity often outweigh mere numbers, and that history is written not only in strategy, but in the bravery and resolve of those who stand their ground against impossible odds. Even decades later, the events on Tarawa continue to reverberate through the annals of military history. The island, barely 3 square miles in size, had been transformed into a crucible of human endurance. 200 Marines, outnumbered more than 7 to 1, had defied expectations and reshaped the conventional wisdom of amphibious warfare. Every detail of the battle, its planning, execution, and aftermath, reveals not only the brutality of combat, but also the extraordinary capacity of disciplined, trained individuals to confront and overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. From the moment they landed, the Marines faced a gauntlet of challenges that would have shattered lesser-trained forces. Coral reefs obstructed landing craft, forcing men to wade through chest-deep water under heavy fire. Japanese fortifications, carefully sited and reinforced, turned every hut, bunker, and sandbag position into a potential death trap. Artillery, mortars, and machine guns were positioned to cover every approach, making each advance a trial by fire. In these conditions, individual initiative became more than a tactical advantage. It was the thin line between life and death. Lieutenant Colonel Julian Smith's speck leadership exemplified this principle. He coordinated the landing waves, adapting in real time to unforeseen obstacles, while maintaining morale under conditions of unimaginable stress. Soldiers on the beach relied not only on orders but also on their training to make split-second decisions, choosing cover, timing their fire, and supporting one another across open stretches exposed to enemy machine guns. Sergeant Major Robert Gaylor, who later received the Medal of Honor, moved through the carnage, reorganizing scattered units and reinforcing weak points in the line. Their actions, repeated across hundreds of small-scale engagements, created the cumulative effect that would eventually turn the tide. Rations, ammunition, and medical supplies were limited, and every logistical shortcoming amplified the psychological pressure. Marines scavenged from fallen comrades, rationed bullets, and improvised defensive positions using whatever materials the island offered. The combination of heat, humidity, and the stench of death made each decision more taxing. Yet these conditions also fostered a resilience forged in extremity. The men adapted to their environment, learning to move silently through dense underbrush, anticipate enemy ambushes, and make use of the terrain to funnel attacking forces into pre-arranged kill zones. Japanese forces, trained and disciplined though they were, had not fully anticipated the degree to which the Marines would absorb, adapt, and counterattack. Over 2 days, the defenders inflicted catastrophic casualties, killing more than 1,000 of the 1,500 attackers. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. The Marines, exhausted yet unbroken, discovered a new depth of confidence in their ability to endure. The Japanese, confronted by unexpected resistance, faced the disorienting realization that numerical superiority alone could not guarantee victory. The aftermath of Tarawa extended far beyond the battlefield. Reports sent back to command detailed lessons in amphibious assault, reinforcing the necessity of precise pre-landing reconnaissance, coordinated naval gunfire, and rigorous training for operations under extreme conditions. Tarawa became a template, its experiences informing the planning for subsequent campaigns in the Marshall Islands, Saipan, and Iwo Jima. More broadly, the battle provided a stark reminder that the human dimension of combat, the initiative, courage, and ingenuity of individuals, could decisively influence the outcome, even in the face of overwhelming odds. On a personal level, the legacy of Tarawa is inscribed in the memories and stories of those who survived. Letters, diaries, and oral histories reveal men haunted by the intensity of the struggle, yet proud of what they achieved. Many described an almost surreal awareness of time stretching and contracting under fire, a sense that every decision carried immediate, irreversible consequences. For the families and communities they returned to, these men became living reminders of the sacrifices demanded by global conflict. Ultimately, Tarawa endures as a symbol of paradoxical truth. When surrounded and outnumbered, human courage, preparation, and adaptability can create victory where defeat seemed inevitable. The story challenges assumptions about strategy, doctrine, and the calculus of warfare. It underscores the enduring lesson that history is shaped not solely by numbers or plans, but by the indomitable will of those who confront adversity head-on. Even as modern military scholars study satellite images, tactical maps, and logistical data, they return, again and again, to the human story, the 200 Marines who stood their ground, the 1,500 Japanese soldiers who underestimated them, and the intricate interplay of preparation, improvisation, and sheer human resolve that determined the battle's outcome. In this small, coral-strewn atoll of the Pacific, the extremes of courage and ingenuity converged, leaving a legacy that continues to inform, inspire, and challenge the way we understand the human dimension of war. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.